everybody on Zoom, so welcome. We're happy we're able to do the hybrid thing thanks to Jonathan. Thank you, Jonathan. We need some clapping hand emojis over here on Zoom. Very good. I guess.
Recording, Jonathan?
Awesome. Okay, good. So I sent out the meeting minutes from January, so if you want to have a motion to approve on those, that would be super. Okay, awesome. Carol, Jonathan second, fantastic. And we're going to jump right in. Our wonderful Jean Kuntz is going to do 5 minutes for a new idea. And it's going to be on the music of Theodora Dutton. So Jean, come on up.
Thank you. Good to see everybody there. And I recently have taken an interest in a composer she's actually from just up the road in Massachusetts and spent another part of her life in New York City. And her name is Theodora Dutton, but her real name is Blanche Ray Alden, and she's from Springfield, Massachusetts. And she was a contemporary of Amy Beach, if you want to sort of place her, a romantic composer. These days we hear a whole lot more about Amy Beach, but they almost certainly knew each other, and but they took different paths through their lives. Blanche, I'll call her before she changed her name, decided when she was 24 she wanted to be a composer. She was going to be a composer, and she wrote Edvard Grieg saying, "I'm trying to become a composer," but she didn't publish her first piece until she was 35, and she moved to Greenwich Village, and with another female composer from Springfield, and their lives paralleled each other from there. But she was also influenced by her times. She lived through the time of women's suffrage, women got the vote, and World War I, the flu epidemic, and Prohibition also in New York City. And all of those things had an influence on her life and may have contributed to her. She was a successful composer, very highly thought of, with awards, and also acknowledged as an excellent teacher, piano teacher. So the first piece I'd like to do just a portion of is one called On a Southern Balcony, and it's actually on IMSLP in her Southland sketches, so you can get the music to that. But what I hear in this is a sweeping time of change, and I think that really characterizes her life. Yeah, it's one I really, really, really love. And the whole inspiration was actually her first publication, Christmas Day Secrets, and that's part of the Suzuki repertoire. And it just happens to be the only one by a female composer in the entire Suzuki piano repertoire. And my students were interested in knowing more, and there was no information on her, so we started digging and found very interesting character too. But this is a good example of, this music is accessible to beginner and intermediate students. This was actually published side by side with Frances Terry's first publication, The Woman She Moved to Greenwich Village With. And I thought that was interesting. This is her very first publication, and it's really, for a long time, was only played in Japan. But that's a separate story. But I did want to play through Christmas Day Secrets, just since it's so familiar. you. And the next piece, actually, the students in my studio really love. And it's one that she would perform when she went out to meetings like this. You know, she was invited in, they'd rent out the parish hall and have the area teachers in, and she would demonstrate some of her compositions. And this is one that she chose to demonstrate even on into her later years, although it was one of her earlier publications. So it's called Forest Horns. And I'm looking forward to hearing our speaker.
Nice. Jean. Wow. Jean, thank you. That was a nice little trio of pieces to start the day with. That's the first music I've ever heard. Well, actually, I heard some music in the car, but this is much better than music I heard in the car. All right, good. I don't know if Felicia is online. Is she with us now?
I do not see her.
Okay, if not, the Connie Murray Festival is coming up. It's going to be in person. That's the plan right now. And so if you have students, I think registration is now open. And if you have any questions about that, you can contact Felicia. But we're really excited to have an opportunity for our students to play in person. Yay! And everybody is safe and everything there at Westchester. So we're very happy about that. So that's on Saturday, March 19th. That's upcoming events. And then also our next meeting is on March 8th, I believe. So we're looking forward to seeing you either in person or on Zoom, because we have this wonderful hybrid thing going. I don't know if Joy wants to mention about Super Saturday. I think, is Joy with us? Maybe if you want to share about that, that would be wonderful.
I'm here.
Hi, Joy.
Hi.
Okay, hold on.
Joy always has a smile on her face. Always.
Your Joy?
It's the curse of my name. I'm not allowed to be in a bad mood.
Go ahead, Joy.
Are we ready, Jonathan?
Yep.
We had a good.
I could hear her last time, but not today.
I'll have to get a bigger speaker, I guess. All right, just keep going.
Should I speak up?
Yes.
Okay. Very loudly. I think we had a successful master coaching with Dr. Craig. Jonathan and Jean, you both had your students. Did they have some good feedback to you?
I haven't heard yet from mine, but I expect to today.
I actually saw that it was going very well, Jonathan. So yeah, that was all good. The playathon was a bust.
Feedback from my students, my three. Yeah, positive feedback. And I was there for the session. I love his style of teaching. It's very direct and he incorporates dance and a little bit of vocal into it.
Oh,
So
great.
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
I could barely hear that, but it sounded good. Sounded like a good report. So that's good. Dr. Craig is great. He helped us get into the recital hall. When we got into the recital hall, we found that the pianos were locked. This is a new thing that they've done at Westchester. They're locking the pianos since winter break. So no one had a key. So everyone who wanted to use the room for the playathon we had to go home. So we're going to go back on the 19th. If anybody's interested in participating in the playathon, we can suddenly have the hall for another day on the 19th of February. And hopefully the pianos will be unlocked that day.
Great. Yeah, Joy, thank you. Yeah, we'll make sure that we have the right contact person there. I didn't realize that they were locking the pianos. I guess that makes sense. But
I think they'll sort it out for this time around.
well, that's great. Well, I'm glad we'll have another chance for them to play, though. That's great. Wonderful. Okay, well, I think that's our business meeting portion. I think we're all looking forward to welcoming Ashley Radcliffe, and we're excited to have you share about your rotational lessons techniques. So I'm going to introduce her. Yeah, Miriam's going to introduce them. I'm going to go around this way.
All right, good morning, everyone. So Ashley Radcliffe is actually a member of the Mainline Music Teachers Association with us, yay. I think this is her first time she's actually been to a meeting. She said there has been a series of events where it prevented you, but I think you joined a couple years ago, you told me, yeah. But now she is here, and we're so happy to meet her. She's also a member of the Lancaster Music Teachers Association. In fact, she's a vice president of that association. So now she serves as full-time music director at the Parksburg United Methodist Church, and it's also the site for her Radcliffe Music Studio. As music director, she conducts the child and adult choral programs, as well as the chime choir and praise band. She teaches piano, voice, and organ privately, as well as small group music classes for preschool age through adult. Ashley is I already read that, okay. I started with that, so I don't want to end on it. Thank you, please welcome Ashley Radcliffe.
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today and allowing me to come and talk to you about rotational lessons. This is something that I started doing in my studio as numbers started to grow. If you're not familiar with where Parksburg is, don't worry, nobody really is. So that means that there aren't a lot of piano teachers, music teachers in the area. Our studio is kind of situated right smack in the middle between Mainline and Lancaster. So I have a lot of small town clientele, which is fantastic. But I wanted to make sure that I could juggle everything because there's a lot going on. So I was looking for ways to allow students to keep coming into the studio without completely burning out. So I looked at different types of lessons, group lessons, things like that. I looked at the possibility of taking on another teacher. That didn't really seem like my game. So when I discovered rotational lessons, the term that I was hearing floating around the forums was 20-20-20 lessons. I don't know if you've heard that before. So that's what I started with, and I do some 20-20-20 lessons. I also do some buddy lessons and things like that. So I found that it was a great middle ground between the one-on-one, just only one-on-one lesson, which I love. I love working with students one-on-one. And the full group, everybody at the same time, group lab class, which I do preschool classes together, general music, and I've done adult theory classes, but with working on piano and working vocally, I love that one-on-one approach. So I didn't want to give that completely up. And I know it's totally possible to do a group class and still have one-on-one, but I really liked this rotational idea. So let me share with you what I have learned through my experience, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the pretty. So here we go. Got my presentation coming up. As I mentioned up here on the handout, if you have it, I'm a note taker, so if you have it, I did leave room for taking notes. It's the middle ground, I feel, between private lessons and group lessons, the rotational music lesson. Formats that I have found within rotational that I have experimented with in my studio are buddy lessons, 20-20-20 lessons, and relay lessons. Now, I did not make up the names for any of these, and I did not invent any of them. Buddy lessons I got from Nicola Canton, who is a teacher in Ireland. She has Vibrant Music Teachers, Colorful Keys, blog. She's got a lot of stuff going on. 20 lessons I got from, she was the president of Texas Music Teachers Association at one point. I believe her first name is Jennifer. I can't think of her last name at the moment. And then the staggered lessons kind of came out of those two when I had families of more than 3 students. So let me go over the different types and that are on here. They're not on the slides. So 20 is actually what's up here. So with it, this is a full rotation idea. So you have 3 students in the studio at the exact same time, but they're all doing different things. So in this case, you're working with student B for the first however many. And 20 refers to the amount of time in those slots. Now, obviously, you can adjust that to whatever you'd like. But just for organizational sake, it's called 20. So you would be working with a student one-on-one for 20 minutes. During that 20 minutes, student C would be working on something on their own, and student A is working on something on their own. Okay, so that's 20 lessons. And I'll get into more of what those somethings are. But for now, buddy lessons is something that I've started doing this year. I tried it out. And that is, at the beginning, we start together. So it gives you that, you have 2 students. At the beginning, they start together. And then we go over a single concept. So whether that be, whatever I notice the 2 of them can be working on together. And I like to have them at about the same level. With 20, you don't necessarily have to have them at the same level. With buddy lessons, it's better to have them at the same level because they're working together. So I like putting the working together portion at the beginning, kind of sets up the tone for the lesson, and then sets up for, okay, and this is what you're doing independently while I'm working with this student. So they start together, then we branch out. I'm working with one while the other one's working independently, and then they switch.
So it's always 3 students that you have in a group?
No. The buddy lessons, I do 2 students at once.
But you said you start with that in
Start-
the 3 student lesson.
So this one's the 20 is a 3 student lesson.
Different thing.
Different thing, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, the buddy lesson. Sorry, I don't have slides for the buddy lessons because that's actually, I added this in after this presentation was made. So the buddy lessons, we start together with the 2 of them, the pair, and then they split into 2. Now, you could also incorporate, a buddy lesson kind of thing with 3 and then put this on top. And then relay is taking this and making it more of a straight line. So you would have your first student come in and do individual, and then they would move to their independent, and your next student will come in and do your individual, and then it would kind of just move down the line. I don't like this one, just gonna say. I did try the relay staggered lessons with a few of my larger families, which is who I started doing these things out with, because it's just so easy. You already have your groups already made when you have siblings. And it did work, but it wasn't as cohesive as a group. But it is an option, and these are the 3 options that I have tried. So as you see over here, some of the activities that we do, I try to come up with a studio-wide project over a course of whatever time, so whether that's a month or 2 months. Right now, we're doing this project again. This picture's from a few years ago. We did 2 truths and a lie with composers. So each student, during their independent time, took that time to find 3 facts about a composer. And then they made a little poster, and they put the posters up. The next week we come in, and everybody during their independent time has to figure out which fact on the sheet is not true. So kids absolutely love this, and they're having a ball with it. So that's what this particular project was over here. And then over there, an example of something that my students do independently, we use Play-Doh mats to review theory concepts, some of my younger students. So that's an activity that is very doable independently because they're able to take that on themselves. So concept-based independent activities, that's what I have on here. That's what I use in my studio. I'm a very concept-based studio. I like working on paring things down, working on single concepts, and then putting them back into the music. So that's what I take the time in these independent activities to do. I take the time to work on concepts. So here are some ideas for different concepts and things like that, so that we have used. For theory, I've used different puzzles and games of that sort, like, word searches, crosswords, and things. Color by notes, especially for the younger students. Instead of color by number, we do color by note, and that can be for pitches, it can be for note durations, you name it, you can find something. Play-Doh mats, Sprout Beat app is one that we've used in the past. I can't read that last thing. For repertoire, I do have keyboards in the room. I didn't when I started out, so I didn't have anything except for tables, but now I do have keyboards with headphones. So I have taken some focused practice prompts and given them to students, especially when I know they have a tendency to come in and aren't warmed up, shall we say, from the last time I saw them. I will give them a focused practice prompt, like, practice your piece this way, give this a try. Gives them a chance to play through their music, pretend they've practiced for the week and warm up before they come see me. And we've also done score studies. So I will actually make a copy of their music, and then we do some I Spy things, and are there any loud parts in your music? What is the fastest part of the music? Where do you see trouble spots? And they can actually write on their music. I have some cut and paste things, and they have to put them on the music. So score study is great. Sight reading, there are plenty of apps out there. Truth be told, I haven't used tech in rotational lessons since the pandemic because they're on the screens outside of lessons so much. So before the pandemic, I used screens all the time. We used Piano Maestro, we used Note Rush, we used all that kind of stuff. But kids are just so happy almost not to be on the screen at this point. So I don't use a lot of apps, but apps are great for sight reading because they kind of gives them prompts. And then another thing for sight reading is introducing new pieces prior to the one-on-one. Again, so if you have a student that you want to start a new piece with, but you want them to come in with a little bit of prior knowledge, work on some sight reading, have them go second or last if you're doing, 3 in a rotation, give them the piece, maybe give them a few hints as to what they should look for, and say, see what you can do with it. Use your sight reading skills and see where we are by the time you get to your lesson. Composition, there are plenty of composition prompts. GarageBand, MuseScore are some apps that we have used in the past. I actually have a Jenga game where they have to, pull the blocks out, and written on the block is a letter, and that's the note that they have to put in to start with. Kind of that whole, back to the rolling the dice and seeing what note, fun things like that, up to, composition prompts. Here is your theme, come up with a, 4-measure melody for this theme. You tailor it to the student, so you're still able to tailor all of these activities to your student. Music history and appreciation, saw that on the 2 Truths and a Lie thing. We've also made trading cards for different composers. Evaluation. So this is a really good time for self-evaluation. If you have students that are getting ready for festivals and things of that nature, I really like giving them a rubric, recording them playing their piece in their lesson, and then giving them the headphones and the phone, having the rubric out there. Here you go. Tell me what you see. And if they're not comfortable with that, there are plenty of recordings on YouTube of students, teachers playing the same pieces that they're playing. Okay, tell me what you see. Or if they're really not comfortable with that, just give them a different one. Just being able to be the person that's filling out the rubric, I have found, has given a lot of more perspective when they go into the festival situation. So that's been really eye-opening for my students. So those are some ideas for activities, independent activities. Okay, so let's move on to who I have found this works for, the rotational student. It's not for everybody. I don't use rotational lessons for my advanced students. They get their full one-on-one, because they need more time. Like, they use up the time with me. We use it wisely. I don't use rotational lessons with students that are not able to interpret directions on their own, i.e. really, really young. Now, I do use the buddy lessons. I have been experimenting with that with some kindergartners just this year, and that has been working well because they're beginners together. I can explain everything before they go and are independent, plus it's only one rotation of independent rather than 2 rotations, say. And there's only 2 of them, so it's less of a classroom management situation. If this one's having trouble over here, okay, I'll step 6 feet this way, take care of you, then come back to this one. It's not so overwhelming. But I do not put them in my 20-20-20 rotations. But students that I do find are really good for rotational lessons, I've given them groupings and names just because it's fun. Okay, so we have the beginner. It's great for beginners because it gives them a positive experience. They get to do fun things and exciting things in lessons. It gives them not as in depth of overwhelming, I've got to take all this stuff home, because a lot of times my rotational students, they do part of their home lesson that they would be doing with me privately in the studio. So they'll do their theory work in the studio so they don't have to take it home. I might give them time to practice so that I can find out how they're practicing and adjust that in their lessons so that they're able to do that at home. Gives me a chance to see how they work independently so I can work on that and send him home. The clock watcher. Yeah, see, chuckles. Y'all know who I'm talking about. Are we done yet? How many more minutes? Being able to change up the activities within the lesson, change the format of what they're doing, and not just having to be me and the student and we're the only ones in here. It has made such a difference. Now, it may just be because I only have an analog clock and they don't know how to tell the time, but they're not watching it, so that's good.
Unfortunately, that's true.
Yeah.
Don't put a clock where the kids can see it.
Right?
That's true too.
But I have gotten the question of, are we done yet, has very much slowed, which is good. The overscheduler. And this is a big one. For your middle schoolers and some of your high schoolers, maybe they started out on fire and now they are involved in 5 different clubs, 2 different sports, and they just got into the musical that you helped them with your audition. Yay. Not that I'm speaking from experience or anything. But again, those are the students that I will give those practice prompts to. And it's not because they don't want to necessarily practice, that they don't want to play or sing or whatever, but the timing is just, legitimately, it's not there. So I have kept those students in my studio by saying, let's move you over to this program. You'll be able to practice before you come to your lesson. You just see the relief just melt. Rather than having to come in the door and, okay, how did practice go? Go ahead and play me that piece. So they're able to go sit at the piano, figure out something, and I tell them, show me one thing today. Show me one thing that you have improved upon, and then tell me one thing that you need help with. And that's what we work on. Because with these types of lessons, you're working with them individually for less time. So you're not going to have as much time to work forward quickly, right? So you don't want to give, it's not a program where you want to think, okay, I'm giving this student 5 assignments for the week. You're not going to have time to cover those necessarily 5 assignments, which is why with my older students, if they are having the time to practice at home, I don't offer this program. We do our typical, private lesson. But for those that they can't handle more than 1 or 2 assignments a week, this has stopped us from punching the brick wall. It really has. And I've been able to keep those students, get them through that time, And then maybe over the summer, we start again with their one-on-one 45-minute lesson. It's just a really nice option to have for those students that just don't have the time. They wish they did, but they don't have the time. And then, last but not least, the recreationalist. Now, I'm not talking about recreational music making. That's a whole separate thing. I'm talking about the ones that come in, and when you have your new student, meeting or whatever you call it, they say, "We just want Johnny to have fun." Okay. Which we do have fun, but there's always, they have to work for it. I mean, they're working on an instrument, they're working to gain a skill, they have to work for it. But what 2020 lessons, rotational lessons as a whole, what that affords them is the fun activity beside the work, and that fun activity backing up the work. And I didn't realize how much more, how less, I guess, the word that they give it in like subscriptions and stuff is churn. Like how low my churn got. I haven't had a student quit in the past year and a half. I haven't been able to take on any new students because my studio is full. This has allowed me to give each student the flexibility to give them what they need. Rather than, sticking with, you come in, you play your pieces, we learn something more, we do an activity and you go. This has given me the ability of, she doesn't look like she's really thrilled to be here. She's not going to come with me first. You, on the other hand, are running toward the piano because you have practiced every day this week and you are so ready to show me, okay, you're over here. I think we have something that you need to practice over here. It allows them to have that time to warm into the studio, let the anxiety level come down a little bit, and here we go. So that's who I find works really well with rotational lessons. All right. So then, and here are the things that I find are really good about rotational lessons, if anything. Fewer assignments at home, slower pace, varied activities, and peer interaction. And this one is so big. This is the other thing. When I always ask at the end of the year for parents to, what did you like, what can we improve on? And what a lot of them say is they love playing with their friends in the room. They love doing things with others. Private lessons can be really, really lonely. And I don't know if it was at what meeting, and our conference this year, PMCA conference, is all about connection. It's that need for us to connect with each other. It's why, it's one of the reasons I think why students will quit private lessons when they join band, or why they choose soccer or basketball over private lessons. They get to do that with their friends. They get that interaction with friends. As lovely as we are, it's more fun to do things with friends.
That's an amazing point.
Yeah. So this has allowed that to ease into the studio, and I have students from different districts getting to know each other, and when we have things like festivals, they cheer each other on, even if they're not all doing the festival, if they're not all doing the recital. Like, there's a very small group, so they know what's going on with the other people in their group, so they'll ask them, how did it go? Or if I say something, in their lesson about, oh wow, that was really good, I actually have students clapping from their independent stations because they know how hard that student has worked. They've been listening to their lesson, and I have one group on Thursdays. One student is very heavy-handed, one student is very light-handed. And the one that's very heavy-handed is 8, the one that's very light-handed is 12. So they wouldn't know each other either way. They're in different districts or anything. But just the comments, you really need to play softly here. She'll say, Mary, I need your hands. It's the little things like that that kind of pull them together, make them a team, and I have seen such great connections. And when it comes to time for our recitals, they actually are, they know the music that their teammates are playing, and you can hear their applause is much more than just, oh, yay, good job. You did it, kind of deal. So that has been so great. getting to see these students cheer each other on through just these small groups. Okay, so planning it out. This is the big, hairy, scary part. And I have a couple prompts on here that I have gotten from curriculum writing things, which is something that I looked into when I decided to change what I was doing in the studio. You need to figure out, what do you want your students to know and be able to do by the time you leave your tutelage? And really, it doesn't matter whether you're looking into doing any kind of change in what you're doing, but you should know the answer to that question. But what that's going to lead you to is what activities are going to help your students achieve those goals. And then when you're looking at rotational lessons, which of those goals can you make, which of those activities can you make independent? What kinds of things do you want to see them do on their own? And then where do your current students fit into this plan and curriculum? Because then you can start grouping them together. So those are 3 things that, you know, whenever you're pinpointing your curriculum and whatever you're doing in your studio, even if you're not looking to change what you're doing, it is good kind of as a spring cleaning thing, you know? What do you want them to be able to do? And that's what I had to look at in order to figure out, okay, so when it comes to them actually being in the room, what are we doing? Well, where are they at on the timeline of what I want them to be able to do? What can they do right now? Where do I want them to go? Personally, I want my students to be able to make music by sight and by sound. I would like them to be able to sit down and read a piece of music. When they leave me, I'm not saying they have to be able to sit down and sight read Chopin, but I would like them to have the ability to look at a piece of music and be able to figure it out. I would also like them to have some skill, and so when they're listening to a piece of music, being able to figure it out. And then I also want them to be able to create their own music. So we work on improvisation, we work on composing. Those are the things that I want my students to know. But that's just me. Like, every teacher is different. So that's what you need to figure out, and the activities. And then when it comes to creating independent activities, my checklist, quick and easy to understand directions. Because if they're more than 1 or 2 sentences, that's all anybody's going to read. It's just like social media. You want to get it out there, you got to get it in 1 or 2 sentences, that's it. Or if you're explaining directions, in about 1 sentence, because then the ear is shut off. I know this because yesterday I had one of my buddy lessons, and we actually did Play-Doh mats, and I said, okay, so you need to put Play-Doh on the keys where it says, with the letter that has a, well, I was explaining it just like that. There was Play-Doh everywhere, so I said, stop! Look at the letter, put it on the keys. Oh, okay. So, quick and easy to understand instructions. Allows for self-assessment. So things like clip cards and the poke cards are great because the answers are on the back, but they have to make the answer first, so it's on the back. Self-evaluation, using those rubrics. I have done ear training with independent students when they're working independently. I make cards with holes in them. So they have half of the letters to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. They have to figure out the ones in the middle. And the self-evaluation is, does it sound like Twinkle, Twinkle when you're done with it? You know, it doesn't have to be overly complicated, but things that they can figure out on their own, are they correct? Multi-level is going to make your life easy. If you can look at an activity and say, I'm going to use this for my students this week, you know, how can I make it suitable to a beginner? How can I make it suitable to somebody that's more advanced? How can I make it suitable, like if you're doing ear training. So those ear training cards. If we're doing Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, the beginning students, they're only going to have 3 or 4 notes, and they're going to write in letters. For my advanced student, they get the first pitch. They have to write it in on the staff. See what I'm saying? So you can use the same activity at different levels. And then aligns with your curriculum. So whatever you've decided in the planning it out stage, you'll want it to fit in. Don't just throw at them some random worksheet and say, well, here you go. It's kind of random. All right. So implementation. So once you've prepared what you want your students to know, you've got your list of activities, okay, let's do this. Now, figuring out where to start. So with who? I started out with multi-sibling families. I have some homeschooling families and other families that have 4 or 5 siblings that come to me. So this was the group that I started out with. I said to the parents, hey, so instead of sending them in one at a time, how about you send them all in at once? You can go to Walmart and come back and pick them all up. Fantastic! This is great. So I tried it out with multi-sibling families. I also tried it out with some friends that I noticed were coming, you know, one was coming in and one was going out, and oh, we want to play. So I tried it with friends, and then students at the same level. If I could go back and start everybody at the same level, that'd be great. It would make my life easy. I could just give everything out at the same time. So those are different ways that you can start it out. When? I just randomly started it. I don't do that. I started it in the middle of the spring, and it was like a month away from the recital, and it was hectic. We made it through, but I wouldn't recommend it. It'd be great as a summer program to start it out, to kind of feel people out for what they think, and get used to on your own when things are a little bit less hectic, when things you know, it's not much going on, or as a standalone option, try it one time. You know, have a group come in, like if you have a group of friends that you've noticed, okay, why don't you 3 come in this week at the same time, and then we try a rotational lesson. Or if you want to just head right into it, and here we go, the start of a new semester. It's always good to have a fresh something at the beginning of a new semester. So don't be like me. Don't start randomly. All right. And then marketing. And this is the same for anything. Highlight the benefits. And especially like I did for that first family that I offered this to. You know, how about you leave your kids with me, all of them at the same time, and you can go and do something else. Putting it like that, the mom was like, great, how much more am I giving you? You know, it already went ahead and worked itself out. You know, you highlight those benefits. They're getting socialization with the other students. They're bringing less things home, less fight on practice. We're, you know, moving into using different, you know, activities, more of everything, basically. So build the excitement rather than, well, we're trying this new thing, and I'm not sure how it's going to go, but, you know, we're going to give it a try and see how it goes. You know, I've done that. I didn't do that with this, I will say, that I've done that with other things, and those are things that typically get dropped within the first month. Okay, so personalization. And this is where it gets fun. And this is where I have changed it. I've been doing rotational lessons since the spring of 2017, I think. And I've changed what I've done every year, honestly. But you can personalize it just about any way you want to. You can change the number of students in the rotation. So you can go with the traditional, you know, 20-20-20 lesson. You can go with the traditional bunny lesson, or you can make it 4 students. You can change the timing. So those 4 students are each going to have a, you know, whatever timing amount of lesson. I mean, you don't want to have, you got to think about if you have 4 students in the group and you decide you want them each to have a 30-minute private, well, then you've got an hour and a half of independent activities every week you've got to plan. So you do have to think about that. You can customize collaborative stations. Do you have in your planning, do you want to say one of the stations is the 2 of them working together when you're working with one? So it doesn't always have to be them independently. If you have games that they can be playing together, music theory games or ear training or what have you. I mean, I know Wonder Keys and again, Nicola Canton, there are so many options for all of those games. You could do that one day, or you could do it every week. You can have group days. I do this semi-frequently, where instead of having them individually, we have a group day, and I have the students play for each other. and then we do group activities. So it's already built in. You've already got 3 in there. So if you wanted to have a group class, it's already there. Virtual versus in person. Obviously, during the pandemic, I went, okay, well, this format's fun. But we used breakout rooms. I utilized Tanara, the app, to do assignments, and that allows me to send, students their independent activities to do. So they'll come in and they'll be in a breakout room, and I'll tell them, your stuff's on Tanara. So I'm expecting that you're doing it now. If you're not doing it, it needs to get done throughout the week. But it gives them that time to do it within the lesson time still. And then, I'll bring them all 3 on screen, and maybe we will play like a 5-minute warm-up game or something like that. So it did work. It wasn't my favorite, but it did work. But again, virtual teaching is the majority, not everybody's favorite, but it works. Challenges and projects. Like I said, we do studio-wide projects, studio-wide challenges, and hang them up around the room so that everybody sees what's going on. And this allows me to do less lesson planning. 1 lesson plan for everybody. You're all looking up your composer this week. Makes my life easy. Tech time or screen free. I talked about this earlier. I did used to use a lot of tech time. We used to use Piano Maestro very, very frequently. But we've pretty much gone screen free since the pandemic, unless, of course, they're doing a virtual lesson that week. What concepts you cover. That's pretty self-explanatory, and you can customize it any other way that you like. I mean, it's fully up to you how you do this. This is just a framework, an idea of how you can use this rotational idea, but it's not something that's necessarily, well, when they're not with me, they have to have lab time, because that's what this is about. You can use those spots to do anything you like. If you want to keep it really, really simple, 1 section is they're practicing for whether they're coming to you first and they're practicing afterward, or they're coming to you last and they're practicing before. And then the other one, they do a theory assignment. If you use a theory curriculum, that's really, really simple if you're doing a 20-20-20 lesson. You've got your sessions already figured out. Or you can, come up with activities for them to do. So you can make it as simple or as complicated as you'd like, but it is fully customizable. So that's rotational lessons in a nutshell. That's kind of crazy. So now I want to hear from everybody, so that if there are any questions, comments, I'm hoping there are.
Hold on.
Okay, he's bringing the mic.
Okay, go ahead, talk loud.
Right.
So I have friends who are classroom teachers, not necessarily music.
Yes.
And so what you hear about them is the more students they have to be careful about their assignments, because that's a lot of work now for them to evaluate. In other words, if I say to this child, okay, you write this, or you whatever your assignment is, how has that impacted your time? Because don't you have to have some time now set aside? Everything can't be self-evaluation.
Right. That's correct.
So has that impacted you just speak to how that's impacted you?
I will agree with that, but I don't think it's impacted me any more than, I guess, because the way that I have done lessons has always been, I'm a lesson planner. So, time-wise, now that's just kind of shifted from everything at the beginning to shifting it into the middle. Does that make sense? So now I'm with rotational lessons. So with one-on-one, I'm planning everything at the beginning for that lesson.
What do you mean?
Like, my time goes to planning everything for that student. So, right. So now I'm kind of shifting that time with my rotational lessons. I do, half of my planning happens right after the lesson, because I'm able to see what they have done. I jot that down, and then I only spend half of the time, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't say it's any more lesson planning time for me. I would say that the time has been spent creating appropriate activities for the concepts that I'm teaching, that has gone up because there's more happening in the studio. But that's something that I enjoy doing, so that doesn't bother me. But as far as evaluation, it just goes from it being one block of time spent on the student to kind of two.
Aren't they handing in activities they've done themselves, the campus self-evaluation, like or is all your independent activity self-evaluated?
Most of them. So now if they're working on a composition, I will have them, we look at it when they're with me one-on-one, you know?
So it's during your time.
So it's during time together, it will be a quick note on this. Again, we're moving at a slower pace. So, you know, I'm not giving them 50 things for them to do over there because then I have 50 things for me to cover over here. Yeah, okay, so now I see what you're saying, yeah. So, yeah, I keep it pretty simple so that when they come see me, it's a simple process of, okay, I see that you need a little bit of help with this, we work on that, and then move forward.
Okay, thank you.
I'm getting asked, if you have a question, can you walk kind of close to the mic as people are having trouble hearing the questions? Okay?
Yep.
So I have a question.
Okay.
So during the pandemic, what constraints do you have with regard to space and social distancing to do these
Okay.
lessons?
I have a classroom. I'm not gonna
Okay.
lie. I do have
At
a
the
really nice
church?
setup. So I have a classroom and I have been able to socially distance everybody because now I have two keyboards too. So before we rotated, everybody literally got up and rotated. Now I rotate. I have a rolling laptop stand and I rotate to them. So I go around the room and go to them. So they have a table, and the one in the middle has a piano, and then each of the ones on the side has a keyboard. Last year, before we learned about the fact that touching things wasn't as big of a worry, everybody had their own box of supplies. So it was kind of like what the schools were doing. Everybody had their own box, everybody had their own space, and that's how we did it. So.
But Ashley, if you say, you have to walk, so the piano, isn't the acoustic piano where you teach?
So yes, I prefer to teach at the acoustic piano. Last year, when we were worried about everybody, not touching the same thing, we relinquished to using the two keyboards as well. Now this year, we have gone back to everybody using the piano. Everybody in my studio has been okay with that. I wipe it down, and whoever's not, they come to the piano. But we did use the keyboards last year in order just for them to be in the studio to make it safe.
Ashley, do you charge differently for the different kind of lessons, rotational, buddy, individual?
I charge per time in the studio.
The student's time.
Mm-hmm.
So on that same note, then the family that you switched over, did they end up paying you the same amount?
They ended up paying more.
More?
Mhm.
Okay.
And-
Because it was greater time?
Because they all had more time in the studio, and the mom was really, really happy because it took time back into her schedule.
Yeah.
So you got to think about that too. For these families that have more than one student, if each student is spending all that time, that's how much time is spent at the studio, and now dinner's late.
So they went from individual, let's say 30-minute lessons, and then when you had them come to the studio for an hour, basically it was double. The payment that they're paying you was double.
Yes.
Okay.
But I gave them a discount because it's family. See,
Okay.
on that new rate. You do what you
Well, if it is family, but if it's just friends, then that's
right.
different.
Then it's different. Yeah.
Okay.
You gave them a discount. Yeah.
What was the response to that? I mean, were the parents happy that it was being tailored to their child? I'm thinking of the ones that are spotty on practice.
Mm-hmm.
Were the parents happy to pay more because it was more tailored to their child's interest?
Yes.
Or, so
I have not gotten pushback. I will say that. I have not received pushback. So, I mean, I'm sure that I could have, I mean, I'm well into it now, so anybody that comes in, they just know the rate. But I did not receive pushback from the families that came into it. And it may have been because the bigger families really talked it up, and then when it came full studio, you know, an option for the full studio, everybody kind of was excited about it.
Do parents ever stay in the room?
No,
Okay, so you tell them they can't stay.
correct.
Okay, so they're not even able to watch to see what their child is actually doing.
So I have space, I mean, they're allowed to be in the hall. I don't let them in the room because there's just, it's too many people. And everybody's okay with it. I mean, they're allowed to stay in the room next door. I keep the doors open so that they can hear. And they're also allowed to be in the hall. They're more than welcome to observe. But I don't have them physically in the room.
But they can ask to be in the room if they want to be.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
Okay, all right, I was just curious how you
Yeah.
did it.
How do you handle makeup lessons when they're taking their lessons on a rotational basis? A child is sick, or they tell you in advance that they're not going to be there a certain week. How do you handle that?
I do pre-recorded video lessons.
Okay,
Yep, and I send them to them on Sonara. I don't do makeup spots.
okay.
I have done makeup spots, and I've put them. I had a swap list, and so, yeah, exactly. I tried that for about a year, and it worked out mostly, but it was not my favorite. So I went to flat rate tuition, and if you are unable to come, and you're not able to join on Zoom even, then you get a video recorded lesson. And I make sure that that's to them within 48 hours of their lesson time.
So a video recorded lesson, you would address what it is that student's working on. You
Yes.
would quickly record something.
Mm-hmm. And then send them on Sonara, just like I would if they were taking a Zoom lesson, I would send them their independent activities to do.
About how long is that video that you make?
Depends on the student. I make the pre-recorded lesson videos for my younger ones, probably 10 minutes. My older ones, they get the full 20. And I typically go into, I review, like if they're working on a new scale, I will go back into, now remember, whole step, half step, and go for it from the beginning to the end. So it's more of like it's a lesson, rather than the back and forth, because it's just you, they're not reviewing anything. And maybe we'll go into, now here's how you transpose the piece that you were supposed to be working on. Here's the next step that you could do with it. So that's what I typically do in the video lessons. I will give them an extra added something to do to the piece that they already have in their lesson book or whatever book they're working on, or I will give them a separate assignment that is completely different than what they necessarily would be working on next in their book, because you don't know what they've practiced. So that's how I do those. It doesn't happen often, but I just did one yesterday, and so I did a new scale, and then a lead sheet, going through a lead sheet and going over the chords and how you build the chords and the step-by-step process, so that when she gets to it, she can work on that lead sheet.
What would you say is the most challenging thing? I mean, that's, about the rotational lessons. Is there anything that's like, this one, everything's really great, except there's this one thing that is really challenging? What have you?
Trying out any new activity,
Okay.
because you just don't know how it's going to go. And you think you've got a fail-proof something that is going to work and it's going to help them and it's going to be something they can do independently, but you don't know until you've done it. So that's the biggest thing.
Do you have to verbally explain how to do a new activity?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
except for with the little guys, because having them read instructions, even if they can read, is sometimes
So
dodgy.
that could take time away from your precious 20 minutes with the individual.
But that's why I say you got to it has to be something that you can instruct in 1 or 2 sentences.
How do you start teaching them to compose? Like, do you have a special method depending on their age, your stage, or?
I don't make up my own composition stuff. I like I really like Daniel McFarland's compositions. He does call and response stuff, and it's a really nice way, and he gives parameters. He gives the parameters, and it's a call and response. So, you know, the one measure will be there, and then they have to fill out the next measure. That's how it starts. And then it's one line, and then they have to make one line.
What's his name again?
Daniel McFarlane, McFarlane. He does Supersonics piano. I really like his stuff. And we've also used Jennifer Eklund has some composition workbooks. Again, they're prompts, and they get more difficult as you go through the book. So it goes from basically cut and paste compositions to here's mostly cut and paste, and then you come up with this part, to here's a baseline, and then you come up, and then you have to figure out the baseline. So just different things like that. Mm-hmm.
How many days a week are you teaching this way?
4 days a week.
And do you mind sharing how many students you have?
I have 32 students right now.
At what age would you start the, for the, you say advanced students get their private lessons, no more rotational, what,
It's not an age thing.
oh, it's a level, excuse me, what level I meant to say.
It's not even, it's a motivational thing. If I notice that they are coming in and they're wanting more, that's the point where I have the conversation with the parent. If I'm noticing that every single week they're coming in and their assignments are done, and they're getting done their rotations early and they want more to do, and they're not, you know, I mean, it's not necessarily at what level, what age. I have some younger students that just their motivation level is there, that I can, you know, spend that extra time. I can afford to spend that extra time with them one-on-one in my schedule because they are that kind of student. And like I said, some of my private students will spend a semester going back to rotational if they, you know, have a whole bunch of stuff that comes into their schedule and they just can't keep up to the rigor of what I'm expecting them to do at home with their private lesson.
There's
Yes.
a question from the chat. Daniel McFarland, or is it Farlane?
Farlane, yeah.
Farlane, does he have a book that deals with composition, or?
He has a ton of books. He has a membership. He probably does have a specific book that deals with composition. All of his method books have composition in them. I use his books alongside of other methods. So the prompts are in there. He's very pattern-based, so he has a lot of what I like to think of as student saver pieces. They sound really cool and they're really simple. But I know he has like lead sheet books, so it wouldn't surprise me if he actually has a book of just the composition prompts. He tends to, you know, reuse the same material and group them together in different ways. I haven't looked at that though.
All right, thank you.
Jonathan, are there any other questions there on the chat?
There was one related to Jean's presentation, which let me just answer this question here. Jean, who publishes the composer's music that you were presenting?
Should I come back up there, or?
Yeah, sure.
She published actually with a number of different publishers. The only one that's currently in publication is Christmas Day Secrets, and that's part of Suzuki Piano Book 1.
Christmas.
And there are, if you look at IMSLP, there's that group of Southland sketches. There are 4 pieces, and the first piece I played was part of one of those. And she also has a Scandinavian dance that's on IMSLP. And otherwise, her publications are not available in print. Although I'd like to start pulling them together. And I'll be happy to share if somebody wants to email me, or, you know, I suppose it could come through the chat with a piece they're interested in, like hunting horns. If you don't, I only know of one original and I have it. But, you know, I think I can happily share that with friends. And eventually I'd like to pull a little book together of her and perhaps Frances Carey's music together and make it more available.
Can you spell the name of the composer again? I don't have my hand.
Theodora,
Theodora.
Theodora.
Okay.
.Dutton.
Thank you. Memory blackout here. Nothing's works.
Well,
Okay.
she didn't choose to take on a short name, did she? But she did choose to take on a woman's name when other people were taking on, you know, male names to avoid the sort of bias they encounter.
I found that interesting. That when she chose to take on a different name, it was another.
There's another woman's name. Yeah, she's a really interesting lady. You know, the more I dig, the more questions I come up with. And Frances Carey is actually even better now. And you know, she published more. She lived longer. So you know, interesting time.
Thank you. Anyone else have any questions or anything?
When you mention beginners as one of your groups,
Mm-hmm.
will you have a cohort of students that you start all at the same time?
No,
Or-
not necessarily.
Okay.
Well, that's not true. I allow my families to sign up for lesson time, so I have gotten confident enough in this format to be able to allow my students to kind of group themselves.
Okay.
So it's not necessarily always a group of beginners. But those buddy lessons that I do, I group them myself. And those have been ones that have come in, you know, this year and wanted to start lessons. So I've paired them together because they're working together. But no, I don't have the cohort of beginners that are, okay, you're all together in here and then you're doing the same exact thing. I think because after being comfortable with this, I think it's really, really nice when I have different leveled students in the classroom, because then they can get that perspective of where each student is and see the different levels. And you know, hey, I played that piece before, or you know, that kind of thing. So that's really nice. They're able to connect in that way. And then the more beginner students can see where lessons are taking the more advanced students. So that's been nice.
How do you handle if let's say you have a couple different rotations going on and one student is playing for you? Does the noise of that interfere with the other activities that the students are doing, or vice versa?
I've only had a couple accounts of that. I had one student who was sensitive to sound.
Mm-hmm.
So in that case, I put him at the acoustic piano, and then we did the private lesson over at the keyboard, and we were able to turn the volume down. But for the most part, that's not been an issue. They have headphones if they want to use the keyboards during the rotation. And everybody has become, again, because we've been at this, everybody's become aware of how loud they are and how loud they would like other people to be, you know, that kind of thing. So that's kind of worked itself out. But yeah, I did have one student that had an issue with noise, and that's how we combated that, and that worked out.
But I guess I'm concerned about there being an acoustic piano, so you're in the middle of a lesson at an acoustic piano, and then these other kids all have headphones on doing what they're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that's not disruptive or anything, but if you say you put somebody who was sensitive to noise at the acoustic piano, now you're being interrupted in your lesson.
No,
By
they're
the
not
sound.
using the acoustic piano.
Oh.
Not everybody's using a piano when they're independent.
Okay,
So I specifically gave him things that were not
Got
using
it.
whoever's at the acoustic piano station. If that's not the station that I like last year because we couldn't move around, so whoever was at that station that day when they were working independently did not have anything to work independently with the piano. That's why I do prefer to rotate the students so that if they are going to do something at the piano, they have the headphones.
Got it.
And that was the drawback, was that I couldn't tell the person that's at the piano, okay, well, you're going to work on this and play this while I'm working with this student over here, because it would have been a big, huge disruption. But other than that, and so, you know, the next week, well, you're not sitting there this week, you're sitting over there, and now this week you are working on this at the piano. Well, this person is not working at the piano when they're independent.
Do you provide the headphones or they bring their own?
So last year, they brought their own. This year, we're back to using studio headphones.
Okay.
And it's interesting you said something, now you let them self-select. How do you go about doing that? Do you set a time and say whoever's available sign up for this time?
I
Do you
use
just, like,
Sign Up
talk to
Genius.
each other?
I use Sign Up Genius, and it's basically it's a sign up sheet website. That's all it is. So over the summer, I will figure out my schedule when my availability for the year, and students that have taken summer lessons get the Sign Up Genius link on August 1st. Students that didn't take summer lessons but were in the spring, they get it on the 3rd, and then it gets opened up, any open spots, to the waiting list and anybody else that wants it on the 5th. So, it's a little bit of a mad rush for a good 2 days, but it works.
I have one concern in how you're saying you have a classroom
Right.
that is of ample size, that for most teachers to implement this kind of thing, I would think it would be the size of your studio or where your pianos are that would orchestrate whether you could comfortably do this. Because I know where my studio is, I have 3 instruments in the same room, but to add more, and 2 of them are acoustical pianos and 1 is keyboard, but to add in a scenario, and I have tried this long time ago, and the biggest confusion and frustration for a lot of the students was that you could start 3 or 4 kids at the same level, and within 2 weeks they've gone in 4 different directions. And unless you are really adept at multitasking on the spot, you have to take into consideration the child that is not the slowpoke, but the speed demon. And so it happened to be 4 friends, 2 of which were my children and 2 friends. And of the 4 kids that started, within 2 weeks, they were all in private lessons because they were on 4 different levels going rampant down the road. And to stall them or to put them into the scenario that you're saying, I admire your organization and the wherefore all of being able to do this, but I look back on that and that kind of stopped me from ever exploring group lessons and doing other things, because private lessons to me have always been the success, and to this day I could not visualize putting any of my kids together, because I've got a 3rd grader that comes in for a 45-minute lesson. He's organized what I'm doing, my order of my playing for you is in the stack.
He's got a program.
And he's got the program. And hey, don't fight it. And I've got several people that are that way. So, you know, for me to implement something, but I've been teaching for 50 years too, so I'm a little set in my ways.
Right. Well, and that's just exactly
but
it.
my question
Yeah.
really goes back to, I would think you would have to have a fairly large studio or room to be able to do this well. Or am I incorrect?
So, if you want to space them out, yes. I have seen it done in smaller areas, but they're not necessarily having, you know, keyboards at every spot.
Okay.
So, when I originally saw this, again, I can't remember her name, but she had 1 student working on an iPad and then 1 student working at a table next to the piano. Like, that was literally it.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's the customization of it. And I totally agree. That's why with you and the students working at completely different paces, that's why the idea of actually having physical group lessons where they're working on the same material all the time,
You throw that out the window.
like, that's not for me. There are teachers that thrive on that, and there are teachers that actually build curriculum specifically for that. That's not my niche. Like, that's not where I'm comfortable.
Yeah, I just wondered, how small would be too small? How big would be the optimum size of a room or a studio in order to implement this nicely and comfortably?
Right.
And and you're saying that you were able to continue doing this in person during COVID because you had the space.
Right.
And so that's, that was a lot of us. I taught FaceTime lessons for 15 straight months.
Oh yeah.
Hello.
Yeah. I mean, we took a lot of time out of the studio. We did. I'm not saying we were able to keep going all the way through the pandemic,
Okay.
because that was just not the case.
Okay,
Um,
but in the case with, going to FaceTime, if you wanted to keep your studio alive, that was really the only option one had. And if you weren't a techie, you learned to be a little more technically oriented fast.
Right. And I think it's taught us that we can figure things out. That whole organizational piece and the logistics is something that we've all had to figure out.
And it's a godsend even now, because if the kids, like I had a boy, he's getting his driver's license, yay, but neither parent were available to bring him to a lesson. It's FaceTime today, nobody can bring him, but he's gonna have his driver's license in 2 weeks.
Right? Yeah.
But you don't realize how involved you get with the whole thing, and I think I've realized that FaceTiming one person at a time is a lot easier than a group.
Oh.
And I admire your fortitude, and I admire your zeal and positivity on the way that is, because I can see where for a lot of students it would work very, very well. But you have to have them kind of where you can mold them too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And that's, I'm a big believer on everybody does things differently, and you have to do them how you are comfortable, and you have to do what you're good at. So this is by no means the best scenario for every student or for every teacher. It's not. I'm not going to stand here and say this is the way you should be running your lessons. But if it's something that, you sit here and you think, oh, well, yeah, I could give that a try. I'm just here to say this is how I did it. And it has worked really, really well for me, because we're on the same page with the group lessons. That is neither of our comfort zone. This just happens to be mine, apparently.
Do you ever have it where your small 3 or 4 kids in a group, do you ever have it where you have larger groups, it's not a group lesson that's consistent, but the occasional people getting together and doing a studio-wide, activity or something, or everyone's watching everyone do their pieces or whatever?
So that was before the pandemic. That's what I was building up to. We actually, each rotational group gave themselves a team name.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and that was so much fun, and we were like, really, and then, we were having those group classes monthly, like with the little ones, and then I was going to try and make a big group class and then that happened. So that is something that I have thought about, and I would love to be able to do, group all of my Tuesday groups, have a special day where they all come in and do something together, have that group class. But, we had to backpedal a little bit through the pandemic. And so but yeah.
How much pushback do you get for, if you were going to do a group? My thoughts always go to Saturday, because it used to be you could call a group together on Saturday and everybody showed up and they were eager and willing. But today you get 19 different soccer teams, or I'm on this travel team, that travel team, and if you can get 3 people out of 3 different groups, you might be successful.
Yeah.
But are you finding that becomes more difficult?
Well, I haven't attempted it since the pandemic. Like I said, we were gearing up for it.
Oh,
Now
okay.
we're geared back down on first year, but yeah, so I haven't, but it was heading that way, and because they were going to be on the same day, like that was my idea. So instead of necessarily coming, you know, on a different day than your lesson,
Come on the day.
Right, yeah.
You've already got them on that day, so just have them all come.
mm-hmm.
Good idea.
Speaking to Carol's point about the different levels being created possibly, you know, in a situation, you mentioned that they sign up on Sign Up Genius.
Mm-hmm.
Do you say now this group sign up is only for these, you know, levels, or what happens is they can sign up together no matter what, and what you do is you tailor make their individual activities to them. Like it's not always. What if one person's more advanced than another? This activity is then almost moot for them, you know.
Right. So just because you're on Tuesdays at 4 o'clock doesn't mean you're getting the same activities as the other people at Tuesdays at 4 o'clock.
Okay, so you're not rotating them with the same activities.
Correct. So what I do is outside the lesson, I group them per level. So I have, you know, these students are, you know, these are my beginner students. They're all getting this activity this week. These are, you know, more advancing a little bit, they're getting this activity. These students are possibly leaving the rotational program after this. They're more advanced, they're getting this activity. And then when time comes, okay, you're out of this pile, here you go, you're out of this pile, there you go.
Okay, at their stations.
Right, exactly.
It's designated what they're going to work on at their
Right.
So your groups don't go from year to year, like if you've got these 3 kids, say this year, you're not expecting those same 3 kids to sign up together for the next year, or will
Not
they?
necessarily, no.
Will they?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Nope.
Because I would think that some parents might think that would be the grouping that they
Now
have.
they can.
Some of the kids might think that.
I
too.
have, I have had, you know, parents, you know, request to, you know, kids, can I be with them? And I'll tell them, well, that's completely up to you. Like, that's something that I don't take on. Scheduling used to give me migraines, and I couldn't stand it. When I started, I was a travel teacher. So scheduling, then you also had to schedule out, you know, getting there and getting back. And so that's when I decided there's got to be a better way to do this, especially when I was in one spot. So I have kind of left it up to that, and may the odds be ever in your favor. And everybody just, you know, I told them this is how it is. This is how scheduling is going, and that's it.
You can simplify that one more step that I've found very successful for years, is that the students that are already in the schedule, if they want the same time this year, and this year, they have the right, the person who's in the time on a given day gets that time until they tell me otherwise.
Right.
And unbelievably, I had very few changes
See,
in the
I
last
do.
3 years, or even 4 years,
See,
because
that's-
I've had some of the same kids. And the only reason they might have to switch is if I ask them to do a longer lesson, or if their day that they have their ride built in
Mm-hmm.
has to move.
See, it's funny you say that because I have the complete opposite situation.
Okay.
Because, you know, I kind of assumed that too.
Yeah,
But the interesting thing is, and it's always the ones that sign up, that have the first to the sign up, they're never signing up for their same spot.
Oh, that is interesting, because
What-
my whole studio thrives on the fact that, you mean I can have the same spot
Right.
next to you too? But,
So I'm wrestling with the idea of how to tailor to each student.
Right.
So, and I'm thinking, like if you have a station that's composition, you can use a different level compositional prompt
Mm-hmm.
for each student.
Mm-hmm.
Could you give us some other examples of how you would tailor to individual students?
Okay, so with the compositional prompts, what I like to do is I will take from their lesson book an idea or a concept that we're working on. And, you know, the compositional prompts are pretty basic, especially the Daniel McFarland ones. You know, that gives you a framework. So I'll tell them within that, put this in. What we've just worked on, we just worked on crescendos. I want to see where you think the crescendo should go. And then that also becomes a piece that they need to play. You know, so we'll add in something that they're doing in their time with me to that individual. So the activities kind of give a framework on the concept that we're working on that week, you know, studio-wide, you know, whatever I decide we're working on that week. But then, you know, I can tailor it with little tiny things, little changes to it, depending on what we're doing in the one-on-one.
Is their name on the project at their
Oh,
station?
yes.
Okay, so there's a specific name.
Yes.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Everything has a name on it.
What's another, other than composition, what's another thing that you could give us an example? How would you tailor it to different students? The same lesson.
Okay,
They're at
so
different levels.
I can imagine a myriad of possibilities.
right, I'm like, that's kind of swimming.
With music theory or maybe ear training, although that might be a little more complex.
Ear training has been the interesting one, and that's been something I've delved into more this year. So I've done some.
Musictheory.net.
Yeah, so we've used musictheory.net. I've also recorded my own and had them listen to the recordings and do things like that.
Oh, and Layla Viss has those Google Forms. She has those forms that you can buy.
Yes,
And they go
yes.
through the form.
Mm-hmm.
And some of that's ear training.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see where you could pull the crossword puzzles that are terminology. And
Yes.
there are a lot of things that are extra, like for a beginner, there's this wonderful color, color the notes, all the A's are red, and
Yep.
they love those things. And yeah, I used to buy the books and then tear them apart because not one child needs to have 15 of them,
Mm-hmm.
but I would hand them out to different things, and then there are some that I want the whole book,
Yeah.
now. And they really get to be good readers and identifiers, because I can see how you could take different things on a certain station and you could have a pile of different levels. So
Yep.
once you've done the work,
Yes.
the pre
Then it just kind of.
starts to fall into packets.
Yep.
And into different, different levels of flashcards or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, because sometimes kids can work on their own.
Yeah, and that's why it was so important to me when I was doing it to seriously plan it all out first.
Yeah,
And to know what I wanted my students to know. Because then, like you said, once you've got it, then it all just it's dominoes. It just falls in, and then it becomes.
your different stations become, because I can see one being the practicing time, that some of the kids expect to practice after school before they come
Right.
to you, and if they get their little time window upset because it was a snow day or mom took them to the grocery store, they come in really kind of fragmented because I didn't get to practice
Yep.
and play through, because they call it, they like to say, some of them
Warm
like to
up.
say, I didn't get my warm-up time. Never use the word practice.
Yeah.
So
But-
you may have, maybe I'm thinking of things too much in boxes. Perhaps not everybody is going to have composition. that
Correct.
day. They might
Correct.
do theory, they might do reading, they might
Yes.
do games.
And if I notice, say, okay, so student C, the last one that's with me this week, okay, they really did not understand what in the world was on that music. They didn't understand the syncopated rhythm. Okay, next week, they're getting something with syncopated rhythm, whether it's listening to a piece and looking at it and doing a score study, or whether it's, if they just didn't understand the timing of it and the theory behind it, then they're going to get a theory activity with it. It allows me, that's what I'm saying, my planning kind of is halfway before and halfway after, because I'm, and sometimes if they're the middle student or the first student and I realize they need help right now with the concept that's on here, and that's not what I had planned, oh well, I'm gonna switch activities and this is what you're doing now. So, I've been at this for a couple of years now. I have some of the activities already banked in my head. I've got a filing cabinet, so it is, sometimes, and this, you throw the lesson plan out the window, and here you go. But
Where do you write out your plans, or where do you write notes to take note of the student for next week? Do you use some kind of online notebook for yourself, or?
so I use Trinara. There is a place to put private notes
Oh, for teacher?
for teacher.
Okay.
Yeah.
I really know nothing about Tanara, so.
It has its quirks and it has things that you can complain about, but for my student, the way I run it, it's been great because the student, we don't use it for, they have like a point system if you practice and everything. We don't use it for that. We basically use it as a digital assignment book that I can attach everything to. And I know some teachers use Google Drive and things like that, but the nice thing about Sonara is I can put those private notes in and I can make a note. Or, I also have just a notebook, literally pen and paper that I will write on top of the piano, make notes about where, if something is, so it's right on the spot.
I use OneNote, Microsoft OneNote, for like every student has its own page, and
Yeah.
I put their assignments in there and stuff like that. And I guess I could share things with them, the assignment page with them. But how much is the cost of Sonara? Is it pretty expensive? Then each student is a cost.
It is.
Okay.
And I put that in, so what your tuition is paying for this year. I actually, make a list at the beginning of the year. Here's what your monthly tuition is paying for this year. And then, I write it off. But it has made my life so much easier because it's on both sides. Because then the parents know what the kids have, the kid knows what the kid has, and I know what the kid has, and it doesn't matter if you left your books at home. Which honestly, and that's another thing, and I don't know if you guys have noticed it, I don't know if it has to do with the pandemic, I have not had students forget their books at home this year. I don't know,
Not very often.
yeah, I used to have it all the time, but
But ironically, I've had a couple of students ask me because they're very note-taking. Like each student has their own notebook, and I've kept a notebook during the pandemic, so I have a notebook on
Right.
each student. And now that we're in FaceTime or in person and stuff, occasionally I'll open up, oh, I didn't take the notes down that I gave to him. But I've had a couple who want to do that, but we're right up at the end of the lesson. I'll say, gotcha, one time, good deal. I'll type up what we talked about and what your assignment is and email it to your mom.
right.
And I have a couple of students that was golden. And don't have to do it every week, because when they're there, when they come in person, then it's a moot thing. But I did that with a couple. I asked one young man, I said, would you like me to type it? Oh, no, Mrs. A, I just need you to tell me, what page did you say it was on my performance book? I didn't get that one written down, because he's gotten where he's very adept at during FaceTime, putting his own assignment in. And if we forget at the lesson time, then he chides me.
Yeah.
You forgot to write something down.
Oh, yeah, students love it when
It's
teachers
fine.
forget. Yep.
Do you have a timer that goes off, or does every student get the same amount of one-on-one time at the piano with you?
Yes, I'm a clock watcher. But yes, I do. I keep an eye on the clock. It's always in, and I did at the beginning. I had a Fitbit, and I had the alarm set for every 20 minutes, so my arm would vibrate, so that I knew. Until I got used to
What 20 minutes felt like.
right, exactly.
You get to the point where you just about know.
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, shush.
Get the side bags.
Huh?
You're very welcome.
It doesn't want to.
Thank you to everyone attending virtually. We appreciate you coming.
There,
We will
Sorry
also
about
make
that.
this recording available to the members. So thank you, Ashley.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chi.
I guess we'll say goodbye to everybody on Zoom. Thank you for staying with us, and we hope you'll join us here in person next time. We got lots of space here at the big church, so that would be great.
Okay, signing off.
All right, everybody, signing off.
Who wants to go to lunch?
I'm down. I just have to.
I just realized my watch is not on.
You're not a clock watcher then.
I always, it's probably sitting on the upstairs.
I asked, there were two questions that came up.
What
that
time is it?
I raised.
It's 11:07.
And I told people that they
11:07, I
tell
don't
me
think.
who they
Even open?
Oh, yeah, by
Okay.
11:30, I don't be open.
I will do
Yeah, I
that.
think if I had something, maybe by 12.